Hello and welcome to the African Tech Roundup, episode 87 for the week ending Monday, December 12th, 2016. My name is Andile Masu, and if you're listening in for the first time, well, welcome. This is indeed where we round up the week's most important tech, digital, and innovation news from across the African continent. But heads up, though, this week's show won't be featuring my usual commentary on the week's biggest news. The team at the African Tech Roundup will be taking a break over the next 4 weeks, but don't worry, we've got your back. Each week over the next month, we'll be sharing sneak previews of episodes from the brand spanking new season of the African Tech Conversation series, which will start to drop this Friday, December 16th. Now, this week we'll share moments from my conversation with the Ethiopian-born Solomon Assefa, who is the director of IBM research on the continent. But before we get to that, I must give a big shout out to GoDaddy for sponsoring the upcoming season of African Tech Conversations. Now, GoDaddy makes registering domain names fast, simple, and affordable. They're the world's largest domain registrar, trusted by over 13 million customers around the globe, and they provide everything you need to get your business set up online, including award-winning 24/7 support. Now, to save 30% on a new domain name or to use any of their services, go to trygodaddy.com/African Tech. Again, that's trygodaddy.com/African Tech to save 30%. Now it's on to this week's African Tech Conversations sneak peek, which, as I said earlier, is drawn from a long chat I had with Dr. Solomon Assefa, who heads up IBM Research Africa. Now, he spent a lot of time at IBM working on nanophotonics technology. His research contributions include high-speed optical detectors, nanostructured platforms for biosensing, as well as quantum information processing. Now, he's co-authored over 150 publications, has over 50 patents to his name, holds a PhD from MIT, and is an honorary professor at Wits University in South Africa. This is one sharp dude and an overachiever of note. Take a listen. We're currently in the recently launched research lab in Braamfontein, Johannesburg. What happens here?
A lot of research and innovation.
For whom?
Well, so our main mandate and our priority is to tackle Africa's grand challenges and also identify local challenges where, we can use the latest cognitive computing technologies, Internet of Things, to solve those problems. So really technologies that will be scalable, that will be commercially viable, but that will also have impact on human lives locally. We want to focus on local problems because those local problems actually lead to big commercial opportunities as well.
So does a facility like this run on IBM's global sort of R&D budget, or are there clients that specifically task you with researching into separate areas? Do you partner with certain entities in order to excavate certain areas? What's the model of a site like this?
It's a mix of all of that, right? So we have 12 labs across the world. So we have a worldwide research strategy. We want to advance cognitive computing. That's one of the big areas where we have made, big breakthroughs in other labs. So we're doing the same here as well. Specifically, we're using, for example, the data from square kilometer array to advance cognitive computing, just as an example, right? So that's kind of a global agenda. But also locally, we partner with the DST, we partner with the CSIR, we partner with WITS, and we define problems or, research programs we feel are relevant locally, and we tackle that together. So it's all about partnership and ecosystems.
And so you've mentioned one project. What are some of the most profound research findings you've made so far, or technologies you've developed, since assuming this role?
We have made,
not personally. Obviously the research team. Yeah,
we've been fortunate enough to, within a year, gather a very brilliant, team of scientists, and they're already making a lot of progress. For example, the work that we're doing in terms of understanding cancer metastasis is very worthwhile of mentioning, right? So we're trying to understand, we look at, molecular networks and see how cancer, from primary cancer can spread through the body, and, can we actually predict which organ it goes to and so forth, which is, groundbreaking, right? Also, the work that we are doing in TB, tuberculosis, trying to use, sensors, Internet of Things, trying to understand how, it spreads, who are the superconnectors, what are the trends and so forth. I find that to be also extremely relevant and important. And again, the machine learning work that we're doing, advancing frontiers of machine learning, using data from the SKA. Like we expect exabytes of data per day in a couple of years. So that means that you have to innovate new algorithms so that you can actually make sense out of that massive amount of data.
Please explain to someone who's not familiar with the SKA what it is and because it's been covered quite a bit. There's this extensive amount of data that Africa doesn't seem to have the capacity to process fast enough, to make sense of fast enough. So explain to someone who might not be familiar with that particular project.
So the Square Kilometer Array Project, or SKA, is an international project. So there's 2 sites where the radio antennas will be installed. One is South Africa and another is in Australia. Now, in South Africa, it's actually one of the big priority research areas for the Department of Science and Technology. So there will be about 3,000 of these dishes, in the Karoo. So what those dishes are doing is looking at, the sky and trying to understand the origin of the universe. Right? So this is a huge, massive scientific exploration. It actually makes me very proud that, it's a Pan-African initiative across, 10 countries ultimately. And the fact that Africa is leading such a big scientific initiative, just imagine the same way as, the supercomputer or HLC, whereas so many massive discoveries have been made, like the boson and so forth, right? So it's that big of a scientific challenge. And that's what scientists from the SK South Africa organization, in collaboration with scientists from the IBM Research Africa, are working on.
So, in helping people understand what IBM does, wrapping our minds around what they do, I feel like IBM is one of those tech companies that is embedded in various aspects of our everyday life, without most people even being aware of it. And, share some examples of how IBM helps improve the lives of, the average man or woman on the streets or at home or in the workplace, or say, Nairobi or Lagos or Johannesburg.
Yeah. Well, if you look at, how cities operate, for example, quite a lot of the decision support systems, or, the systems that enable city officials to make day-to-day decisions, we have quite a lot to do with that.
In support of the city of Joburg, for example.
So we work quite closely with the city. For example, if you look at, how they run their, air quality monitoring stations, we have developed a system for them. If you look into monitoring of crime, again, some of our systems are being used in running those day-to-day activities, in some of the healthcare systems as well. So we have quite a lot of, IT infrastructure, cloud infrastructure that cities, officials, and companies and clients use.
In terms of the consumer aspect of IBM's business, there definitely seems to be a shift, and correct me if I'm wrong, there seems to be a shift towards enterprise solutions, consulting to government and those kind of soft solutions, as opposed to sort of the things that we'd expect to have in our hands, like a smartphone or some kind of device. Is that am I right in saying that's been an intentional shift for IBM?
Yes. By the way, for example, you just showed your iPhone, right? So we partner with Apple, right? So we are very good when it comes to working with enterprise, businesses, but also we partner with companies that are very good in terms of, consumer reach as well. If you look at one very good example is in South Africa. If you look at, many of the big banks, almost all of them use our, mainframes, right? They use our IT solutions and cloud solutions. So we deal quite a lot with enterprise, but also through partnerships, we indirectly impact, consumers.
Back in 1943, the then president of IBM, a guy called Thomas Watson, famously declared the following: "I think there's a world market for maybe 5 computers."
Yeah.
Okay, so in your opinion, what are some of the most profound miscalculations currently being made about the future of Africa's tech and innovation scene?
Oh, that's a tough question.
I mean, maybe it's stuff that you see come up in think pieces on the regular, or you hear spoken about at conferences, or you overhear in strategy rooms, and you're thinking, nah. Or maybe when you visit overseas and you clearly meet people who might be out of touch with where things are going. What are some of the major miscalculations, or perhaps not so major?
I wouldn't characterize it as miscalculation. I think everybody realizes the potential of the continent now. You know, if you look at the demographic shift, and if you look at stability and so forth. Perhaps one common theme that I see is everybody thinks that, you know, just because of mobile phone penetration, that seems to solve all the problems of Africa. And there's too much talk about that without in-depth thinking of how exactly, like what kind of solutions are we going to deliver on those mobile phones, you know. Just some simple apps on phones, I don't think that will change how the continent operates, or I don't think it will impact, you know, lives of individuals. You need to go to the next level and say, how are those apps actually going to help, you know, someone's life change? How are they going to help them earn above the poverty line? So I would love to see a little bit more of in-depth thinking about some of the solutions that are being created than just, you know, kind of, you know, press releases and hype, and, you know how it is on the news cycle. So all of a sudden, you know, there's a startup, you know, there's a big, you know, press event, and then that app disappears without it getting traction. So
it's almost an over enthusiasm, a misplaced enthusiasm, maybe.
Yes, a little bit of that. Yes.
Yeah, because I mean, we can't deny it's all. I mean, the demographics do suggest that's where we're going. But it's always interesting to me covering the scene, how overstated, for example, just how many people actually have smartphones in their hands to start with. You know, I mean, in South Africa, what are we, 4 out of 10, you know, South Africans? And that's and we leave the continent, as far as that's concerned. Also, the definition of smartphone, refers to anything that says web enabled, not necessarily something super clever like an iPhone or a Galaxy or something.
There's another thing too. I think, to add to that is, again, I mean, saying, yeah, you know, some simple solutions will improve people's lives. From my perspective, actually, I mean, exponential technologies are the ones that we should target. Like when we talk about cognitive computing and impacting individuals, I really believe in that, because if you really want to leapfrog, you need to have new thinking. What is that technology that's going to dramatically, you know, change how you run your day-to-day life, how you make your life kind of economically viable, how you run your business? I think we need to think about the impact of the latest technologies, like, you know, what's the impact of machine learning? What's the impact of Internet of Things? So we need to be on that exponential curve than always saying, oh, yeah, you know, like phones will solve our problems. It's much more than that.
So tell me how some, you know, a junior tech person, or some, you know, someone new to the industry, perhaps coming straight out of varsity, perhaps where you were when you first, you know, you graduated with your first degree at MIT, is listening to you and says, okay, I buy into that. I want to put all my energies into promoting exponential technologies and not just surfing, you know, hype waves. Where does a person like that start, practically speaking, do you think, in terms of getting stuck in?
I think a lot of these technologies, if you want to learn about it, it goes back to our previous discussion, they're available. I mean, you just need to go into some of these online courses and try to, you know, explore, learn in depth, and also, you know, go to some of this, you know, the innovation hubs, and, you know, go and talk to some professors. So you just need to be a bit more proactive in terms of, you know, going and learning about these technologies. But all of this information is really available everywhere you are.
And so, you know, over the years, you know, various prophets of doom have predicted the demise of IBM and others, you know, other, you know, incumbents in the field. In many times in the company's history, IBM has seemed to struggle, you know, to deal with change and innovate. And How would you say IBM is working to maintain relevance in the wake of major stars dropping out of the sky, as it were? Your Nokias and Blackberries and Kodaks. What is IBM doing to ensure that they don't become another case study in an MBA textbook?
It will never be that, because we're like a 104 or 105-year-old company now, and we have transformed a couple of times, right? And many of the technologies that actually led to revolutions in the IT industry were invented by IBM. And we're not shy about inventing these new technologies, even if it means that it could lead to our own disruption, right? So we go ahead and invent because it's good for humanity, it's good for everyone. Now, in terms of us being relevant, if you look at IBM now, we're a cloud company, right? A cognitive company, all of our solutions delivered over the cloud, right? So, and we have successfully transformed into that in the last, 5-10 years. So it's kind of changes in our DNA.
And so you mentioned disruption. Do you feel that IBM is sufficiently diversified to be safe from that, or sufficiently large enough to sort of survive even periods of like lean periods where perhaps the company might be behind the curve? And what's the company's attitude towards buying in some of the innovation that maybe isn't coming up organically within the organization?
Well, it is. So that's the thing. What makes IBM very unique is the fact that we have IBM Research. The technologies that we develop in IBM Research, they're 10, 20 years, ahead of the curve, right? So a lot of changes that you see in the IT industry, as well as the transformation of IBM, pivots back to research. Like, look at cognitive computing. That came out of IBM Research. I don't know if you know about Jeopardy, like the quiz show, and how Watson came to, was announced, right?
So I'm familiar with it, but I think that's a really great example of a key moment. One of my mentors would put it that way. A key moment for the business. But break it down for our listeners.
So Watson was one of the grand challenges within IBM Research. There were a couple of scientists working on it, and they're developing a lot of technologies related to cognitive, which encompasses obviously natural language processing, machine learning, and many other cognitive technologies, right? So, and it started as a small team, but then it's expanded. It became a big grand challenge. It grew, and the Watson was able to defeat the champions of the Jeopardy quiz show, right? And that really announced the new era of cognitive computing. And now you see all the other companies kind of, buying into that. And there's a big transformation, right? You hear a lot about, deep learning, machine learning, and how that's transforming industries. But really, it goes back to the moment when, Watson won that quiz show. So, the reason I mentioned that is to show that because IBM is unique, because we have this big, research institution that's always ahead of the curve. So, and that leads to our transformation. So, and we have a lot of innovations coming out of it.
And so I'm sure you're sensitive to the inherent risks of the trend towards cloud computing, machine learning, particularly, some high profile, individuals, not least South Africa's own Elon Musk, declaring his fears about how we could potentially mishandle this point in our history if we're not careful. And given IBM's commitment to this area, what are some of the bigger risks in your own mind, and how is IBM going about mitigating them?
Look, our view of cognitive computing is it's something where the human is always in the loop. It's technologies that will assist humans make better decisions. Humans become more efficient, right? And there's always this discussion about, could it lead to job losses? We think that it could actually lead to more jobs, even types of jobs that we don't even know about, right? So, and then there's always the question of, what if the machines take over the world? Something that comes out of Hollywood. But even in that front, right, 2 weeks ago or a week ago, we had an announcement where, IBM, Microsoft, I think Google, Amazon, all of those companies came together and created a foundation so that we can talk more openly about the ethical questions behind, cognitive computing and AI. I mean, yeah, I think all of the risks that you're referring to, they're out in the open and they're being openly discussed. In my view, especially in the context of the African continent, I think we need to harness the power of AI, this exponential technology, so that we can leapfrog and, we can improve lives, impact lives. I mean, look at healthcare. I mean, there's so much that we need to do. I mean, we need to make our hospitals more efficient, our doctors more effective. And if you can harness cognitive computing or natural language processing to look at pathology reports and automate it quickly, understand the statistics of disease occurrences across the continent, and then be able to really understand where to allocate resources, I mean, that's a big win, right? So the advantages, in my mind, outweigh the risks, especially in the context of the continent.
Well, the rest of that conversation is definitely worth a listen, and it drops on africantechroundup.com on Friday, December 16th. Just head to the main menu and click on the African Tech Conversations tab. You can also find the series on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and any other good podcatcher out there when you search for African Tech Conversations. And then, of course, one last time, many thanks to GoDaddy for sponsoring this season of African Tech Conversations. Remember, you can buy your own domain name, build your own site, or use any of GoDaddy's business tools and save 30% at trygodaddy.com/African Tech. That's trygodaddy.com/African Tech. And that's the show, folks. Do join me again next week and all through the festive season on africantechroundup.com for more sneak listens from the African Tech Conversation series. But for now, I'm Andile Masuku. Until next time, do take care, Africa.